Terrarian in the Dungeon, Chapter 88, Fan Fiction, by Azazyel. Please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel for listening and patreon.com/Azazyel to read all of his stories. Sitting back home in the comfort of my workshop while Alfia went back to her sister and Belle, who were supposed to have spent the day together, I stared at my anvil with a terrible weight on my shoulders. The soul of eternity. Literally godhood in a fucking miniature black hole that could fit in my pocket but required over 400 items I needed to personally craft, to say nothing of the dozens more I needed to get from bosses. But such an item was far from me now. Now I was just making the damned best shoes I could get in pre-hard mode Terraria, being the Terraspark boots. Green-colored, almost comic-looking boots that had a whole list of things that they could do, and after I made sure the obsidian shoes merged into the other Zephyr shoes and were thicker with denser materials, I got the warding enchantment on the boots so it provided some extra armor while I inspected the boots I spent 3 hours making. Terraspark boots. Allows flight, super fast running, and mobility on ice so I don't slip. Provides the ability to walk on water, honey and lava, as well as improves my body's natural resistance to high temperatures. I spoke as I listed what the dozen-something accessories I merged into the Terraspark boots did. With my centerpiece of mobility complete, I couldn't help but chuckle as I hopped into the air with green flames shooting from the bottom of my feet. And I felt my mana minutely drain as I directly fueled my boots to give myself a true flight for a couple of minutes before I cut off the mana, dropping me to the ground. I got mobility out of the way, so I don't need to be using my grappling hook as much until I get one that teleports me to wherever it grabs, I muttered as I adjusted my tools and took a breath. Alright, let's upgrade my weapons, I said wryly with a sigh as my handling of all the hell materials filled my mind with all those crafting recipes. And I realized how my sword of grass melee weapon, even with its poison, was lacking compared to swords that used hellfire that targeted the soul, or a sword that allowed my body to phase out of reality for a couple of seconds whenever my sword parried an attack. To say nothing of magic weapons that did any number of things, from sending a spinning scythe made out of solid shadows to attack people. So I got to work. I made the Demon Sikhti book for magic, which would allow me to use that spell, and likewise made the Opal Striker, a strong revolver that I would end up fusing into my Magna Cannon anyway when hard mode rolled around and would become my ranged weapon of choice for a while. But for melee, I basically already had the best pre-hard mode melee weapon in a teardrop cleaver that I got from the Eye of Cthulhu, which made anyone struck with the blade curse to be half as durable and physically strong. After I was done making the weapons and accessories with all the hell materials over the next half day, when Seshet asked me something rather bluntly, I realized her words were all too true. So what else is there for you to craft in this supposed block of information than gear you face? She asked, and I was struck by that knowledge. I realized that literally only 2 bosses remained in this pre-hard mode soft lock I was facing. Skeletron and the Wall of Flesh. I already basically had the best armor for myself until I hit hard mode, and with the Empress of Light's warning, I realized I needed to do this alone, and more importantly, out of the dungeon, so it didn't freak out. Yeah, you are right. There's not much else for me to make as I can't use more than 2 weapons at once at most, I said wryly as I sighed before looking at Seshet seriously. Seshet, I am going to push through my limits and reach the next major step in my growth, so I don't plan on coming back for a week or so. I finished, and her amber-slitted eyes tightened at my purpose-filled form, and then she smiled softly. Very well, Jake Barris, go with my blessing. Hunt your prey and come back home with trophies of your kills, she said, giving me a tight hug before tilting her head to the side as she looked up at me from the hug. So I assume you will not be taking Belle with you? I smiled wryly, and she giggled as she danced out of the hug with her snickering. Oh, Belle is going to kick your ass when you get back, huh? Seshet laughed, and then the door to the room was shoved open, and I blinked as Haruhime came into the room with a large backpack on her back, and she was wearing a look of determination. I want to go too. I want to get strong as well, she said fiercely, and I couldn't help but coo at the sight of the golden-haired fox girl trying to sound so determined. Then she continued. Jake, you need a supporter while you go on an adventure, and I would happily take up that responsibility while you teach me how to get stronger. She partly argued and almost seemed to beg, and I just nodded with a chuckle. All right, Haruhime, relax, I said, smiling before I nodded. You can come with, and sharpening your teeth on the weaker monsters outside the dungeon can be a good way of easing you into combat anyway, I said partly to myself, and then when I pocketed the large backpack hanging on her shoulder, she pouted. But although I have no need for a supporter, I wouldn't mind a friend going with me, Haruhime, I offered, holding out a hand to her, and she smiled brightly as she took it, and I heard Seshet gag in the background. I looked over, and she rolled her eyes and began pushing us out of the sitting room of the workshop. Ugh, just take her into a tent and mount her later if you both are going to get so damned mushy. Now get out so I can have a drinking night to break into Flitus's shell. Seshet said bluntly as we were pushed out of the building, and as we went past the kitchen I saw the elf in question blushing lightly with her ears turning pink as Seshet said the elf needed some kinship in the bath or something to get the stick out of her ass.